It's time for Showtime College Football. Welcome back, everyone, to Showtime College Football. I'm your host, Chase Davidson. I have been so busy, and I apologize. I'm in school. I got work. I've been busy, but I love doing this podcast, so I'm going to be a little bit late this week, but you'll be seeing this on Thursday. I'm filming this on Wednesday. We're going to talk about the college football playoff rankings, what I think about them, what I think about what the committee is doing, and what I think about last week's action, and what I think about this week's action. All coming up next. I'm excited. Let's go. All right. It's November. It's the second week of November. The playoff train is rolling. The college football season is heating up, and playoff races and conference championship races are heating up rapidly. So, okay. Starting to get cold. I got my jacket on. Honestly, when it's like November, December, I love the cold. It's like so refreshing and nice. Obviously, up here in Utah, it is more cold than most places y'all are probably at. Most likely. But I love it. Like the 40s, like what it is right now, just 40s. And maybe it's 50s on a sunny day. Oh, I love it. All you need is like a long sleeve tee, maybe a sweatshirt, and you're nice and warm, but you can still be active, have some fun. Anyways. Yeah, so I'm really happy right now. Gotta love it. November, college football starts getting good. Start getting these deep rivalries. Yeah. Oklahoma State, Oklahoma happened last week. That was epic. Gonna be talking about that. And what I want to start out with is my reaction to the college football playoff rankings. I talked about this last week, but I still don't understand some things that the playoff committee is doing. But before I start with that, I know it's hard. And I know that people in that room on the committee are not dumb and they're not stupid. It's literally hard for anybody to rank college football. If we had literally one person who did it perfectly, there would still be a lot of disputes. Literally, no matter what you do, there will always be backlash, and there will always be. I mean, it's college football. It's all relative. I talk about this a lot. It's the most relative gray area. It's all on opinion. It's all what you value the most. There's not a perfect ranking. You can get close. You can get ones that are fair. But what you look for is consistency. And this is what I talk about. If you're consistent, then college football teams know how to react and they know how to play. And they know what is going to get them to the, to the final playoff, to the, what's going to please the media, what's going to please the playoff committee. So, especially like ADs with scheduling, how a team performs, if they need to blow out a team by even more, because back in the BCS era, when you have computer rankings, the amount that you beat a team by is important. So, I mean, coaches back then, they're blowing out teams by 80 because that helps the BCS ranks, the computers value them more. ESPN FBI places huge factors on if you're supposed to beat a team by how much. Basically, if you cover the spread or not is really going to influence how you are ranked. So, anyways, what we look for is consistency. So in this week, not much really changed in the top 10. Obviously, Oklahoma fell out of that number 9 spot, and everyone kind of just shifted up after they lost to Oklahoma State in that thriller. So Ohio State is still ranked number 1. Georgia's number 2, Michigan 3, Florida State 4, and then the next 2 out are Washington and Oregon. So Oregon being the top 1-loss team. Here's the thing. It's not the worst ranking. It's not the worst ranking I've seen. But the problem is that a lot of teams are getting biases and a lot of teams are getting criteria used against them that other teams are not. I talked about this last week, but I have more of an opinion now that I've solidified that I think is more, that I think you guys will agree with, and I think that we can move forward with. Obviously, it's impossible to get a perfect ranking, but here we go. So, here's the baseline. Why is Ohio State number 1? The number 1 ranking is the most important. Why is Ohio State number 1? It's not because of dominance, right? It's not because of the eye test, because they're really not the most dominant team. On the eye test, they kind of look a little sluggish at times. Okay, they're number 1 because of their resume, and their resume only. Only their resume. That is the only thing making them number 1. That and that alone. Okay? This is why it is so weird and so annoying what the playoff committee is doing. Because there is no other reason to have Ohio State at 1. Zero. Yes, they're talented. But still, I mean, Rutgers is a decent team. Not the worst, not the best. Very, I'd say, upper ends. Of the non-ranked Power Five, definitely a good team this year. But you didn't look very good against them. You haven't looked good against some other teams, which is fine. And honestly, I'm okay with Ohio State being one in the rankings, as I've explained, if we're going off of resume. Because Ohio State has a really good resume. You could debate that there's some other resumes that are going to be better, which I'm going to talk about. I ranked my resumes. But clearly, it is only resume and resume only because other teams have been far more dominant in their wins, despite being against not quite as good of teams. So it's clearly resume and quality wins. Overall strength of schedule, strength of record, Ohio State is number one. Even at Wisconsin, at Rutgers, Maryland, you've got obviously Penn State, Notre Dame being on the road. So you've got a really good resume, and that is the only reason they are there. Only reason. Okay. Georgia and Michigan. Really good teams. The complete opposite of Ohio State. Literally the polar opposite. Georgia did gain a little bit more resume this week. Okay. But if we're going off of strictly resume and resume only, Georgia and Michigan are not 2-3 at all. Georgia, maybe you could say is top 7, top 10 in resume, maybe. And Michigan being, 111th in strength of schedule. I know that they are clearly a top 10 team, and they've illustrated that with the eye test. I have them at number 1, but because I don't use strictly resume and resume only, I'm not the one putting Ohio State at 1. So here's the thing. If you put Ohio State at 1, if you want to be consistent and unbiased and equal throughout with how you rank your teams, Georgia and Michigan should not be 2 and 3. Honestly, here's what I'm looking at with when I look at the strength of schedule, how teams' resumes look, quality wins wise. They are consistent. Here's one thing that playoff committee is doing that's consistent, which I appreciate. Even if I don't agree with it, like how it's working, at least it's consistent. How they're grouping the teams in pods based off of their record. So you have the undefeated teams, 1-loss teams, 2-loss teams, and then kind of like your 3-loss teams. They're all in pods. They're all grouped, which honestly is not the worst thing in the world because they're being consistent with it. They are saying, okay, despite Oregon and Texas and Alabama having really good quality losses and even better resumes than some of these top teams, they have a loss, so they're going to be lower. If you're consistent with that, then that's fine. That's just how you're going to do it, and that's just how it's going to work. But here are the best resumes in college football. Alabama and Texas being in the top 4. Washington, Ohio State, Alabama, and Texas are kind of my top 4 separating themselves from the rest. These look the best. And if we're going just off of current ranked wins, like over currently ranked teams, Washington has a win over 6 Oregon and at 21 Arizona. Okay? No other wins count, just the ranked wins. Obviously, there's others. You can have a stronger Power 5 schedule. I'm just going off ranked wins to keep it simple. Ohio State, number 10, Penn State, number 20, Notre Dame on the road. Alabama and Texas have both beaten 3 ranked teams. Alabama beating Ole Miss, Tennessee, and LSU being ranked 10, 13th, and 19th. Texas has, of course, beaten number 8 Alabama, number 16 Kansas, number 25 Kansas State. Okay, so those Alabama, Texas, those 1-loss teams have really good resumes. Really, really good resumes. I think that Oregon is better than both these teams. But wait, if we're going off of just resume, shouldn't Alabama and Texas be miles above Oregon? Oregon's best win is at Utah, dominant, to say the least, 35-6 against number 18 Utah. But that is not even close, not even remotely close to Alabama and Texas. Not even close. Okay, they did keep up against Washington. They had a close game against, but they lost. They lost against Washington. And clearly, the undefeated teams are a huge gap from the 1-loss teams. So, here's where it needs to be consistent. You gotta have, if you're gonna go with resume, you gotta stick with it. Okay? And my rankings are different. If I were to rank the teams, they might be similar because I look at a lot of different things. But right now, there is no way I'm ranking Ohio State number 1 because that resume isn't overly powering to make them, they're better than everybody else, no question. because their resume is good, but I'd say their resume, if you look at it, compare it to Washington. Both these teams undefeated. Let's compare it against Washington. Washington beat number 6 Oregon at home. Ohio State beat number 10 Penn State at home. Okay, they both have top 10 wins at home. I'd say the Oregon win is definitely better. Okay, so Washington kind of got a little step up on them. Washington has won at number 21 Arizona. Ohio State has won at number 20 Notre Dame. Okay, maybe they did beat Ohio State, beat Notre Dame when they were a little bit higher, a little more confident. Notre Dame might be a harder environment. Number 21 Arizona, yeah, it might be not quite as hard of an environment, but 3 teams just went down at Arizona. 3 ranked teams just lost against Arizona. Okay, whatever. So if we're going off resume, Washington should be number 1 or number 2. Even if you think Ohio State's is better, okay, Washington should be number 2. Easily. Not even close. Followed by Alabama and Texas. Even if they have 1 loss. If you're going off a resume alone, that's how it's going to be. So, yep. Oh, yeah, and then Michigan, of course, has literally not played a ranked team the entire year. No, not even a currently ranked team. They have not played a ranked team with a number on their name the entire year. Oh, wait, but even that. The best team they've played is Rutgers, and other than that, nobody. Like, not even anybody with a winning record, hardly. Like, does Minnesota have a winning record? I don't know. I don't have a producer to help me check that. Maybe they have a winning record. I don't know. He played Rutgers and Purdue. Anyways, Georgia got their top 25 win against Mizzou, against a current top 25 team, but they have won compared to the 2 and 3 of the other teams surrounding them. So, while I agree that Oregon is better, I would say right now, I would take Oregon over Washington. I know they won head-to-head, but how it's playing out, how I look at these teams, Oregon being so balanced, Washington being a little imbalanced, or I would say Oregon is better than Alabama, Texas, and Washington. But that's what I think. Resume is important, but also eye test other things. I'm not taking resume alone. So, yeah, I agree with Oregon being ahead of Alabama and Texas, but not for the same reasoning they do. Their reasoning makes no sense. No sense. All right, there's my rant. It was a little better than last week, wasn't it? A little more clear, a little more collected. I got my thoughts together. And then also just to mention Florida State, their resume is not looking as good as it did 3 or 4 weeks ago. Their resume has been slowly just down. LSU rising and then falling. LSU still ranked number 19, but Florida State now only has 1 ranked win, over a currently ranked team. 1. Duke no longer ranked, Clemson no longer ranked. And honestly, Florida State kind of being a letdown. The more I've thought about it, in my rankings, I think I still have them at 4. But honestly, I think if I were to rank them again, just as I'm thinking about this week, I've listened to some podcasts, I've listened to some wise men named Joel Klatt, Josh Pate, all the podcasters. I'm starting to think Florida State's probably the least of the undefeateds. If we're going just by undefeateds, I'm saying Florida State has the least strong resume, haven't been quite as dominant, and I'd take Washington over Florida State now. Just pure resume dominance. If you put Oregon in the mix, whole other story. I might put Oregon over both of them, but the resume is not as good. So that's where you come down to that. But yeah, if Ohio State was not number 1, here is my last thing to finish up the whole thing. If Ohio State was not number 1, we would not be having this conversation. If Georgia was number 1 and Michigan was number 2 and Ohio State was number 3, I would say, oh, these actually aren't too bad because they're, resume is important, but like they obviously look at the eye test a lot. They look at the eye test. And frankly, you got to choose one, or if you don't choose one, you got to be consistent and be clear with why you're choosing them. Because Ohio State has no business being number 1 unless it's only resume. That's why. I hope I made my point clear. Because resume is not everything. It is, in my book, most of everything. It is a 70% chunk of what I look at. I love resume. I love quality wins. How you do on the field is super important. I love it. But there's more to it than that. There's still a 30% that, it changes things. You can only play your schedule. How dominant are you against weak teams? How dominant are you against those strong teams? All right. Had to take a breather. I got to take a breather, man. Yeah, I'm not mad. Obviously, it doesn't matter too much. And my thought, even the playoff committee said, well, you know, at this point, it doesn't matter too much. The final rankings matter more. If it doesn't matter too much, then don't rank Georgia and Michigan so high if it really doesn't matter so much. You know, the playoff committee is really going off of just kind of people pleasing is what I feel like. They're trying to please everybody by, you know, we want to rank people off of resume, their true resume. Okay, Ohio State at 1, but wait, we can't put Georgia and Michigan too low or else everyone's going to have a mutiny on us. Well, you're going to have a mutiny either way. So you might as well do it accurately or do it consistently or both. There you go. You know, as I was doing this, I looked, and there's only a few teams that have 3 current ranked wins. You guys know what I mean at that point. Alabama, Texas, and Oklahoma State. There might be one more, but I didn't find one. I didn't look into every single team, but I looked at the ones I could think of off the top of my head, and I think Oklahoma State's the only other one that's 3 ranked wins over 3 currently ranked teams. Oklahoma State being Oklahoma, Kansas, and Kansas State. So really impressive. The Big 12 is kind of, all of a sudden, after having a really tough start to the year, has been, oh yeah, like, we're good. Big 12 now has 5 teams ranked. Good for the Big 12. Yeah. Anyways, Texas, Kansas State came down to the wire. Epic game. I'm happy that Kansas State is still ranked because honestly, Kansas State, I would take them over a lot of teams right now. There's a lot of things the playoff committee is doing good. I like that some teams are ranked. I like that some teams are ranked higher than others. So like there's plenty of things that are well that I like the rankings. But some of it I think are just ranked for the wrong reasons in those places. But what do I know? Just my opinion. Anyways, Alabama, LSU. Alabama, I think, is coming back from the dead. Alabama is really, really good, and I don't think a lot of us want to admit it because it's Alabama. Alabama has now won 3 ranked games, as we've seen. Obviously, Tennessee, I think 13 is a little mistelling. They just haven't really played too many teams. I don't really hate the ranking, but I think 13 sitting at Tennessee, or a 13 sitting on Tennessee's name is a little. I don't think Tennessee's quite that good. You know, I don't think it's a top 15 team. But alas, Alabama has beaten Ole Miss, Tennessee, and LSU since losing to Texas, and Jalen Milroe is getting his stuff back together. Nick Saban is compiling this team out of scraps, scraps for Alabama, and they're 8-1, only lost to Texas, and they can protect the quarterback a lot better than they could before. And they are figuring out stuff at a pace that is really frightening because Alabama is now threatening for a playoff spot, and I would not be surprised if the SEC championship is Alabama, Georgia, and Alabama comes in there and wins. And then you have a big dilemma because in the playoff, when we get in November, the playoff scenarios start running wild because now we're down to 11 teams that in theory make the playoff, meaning, 1 loss, 0 or 1 losses. Okay. Have a shot at their conference championship, with most of these guys do. And obviously resume and stuff, but any Power 5 team that has 1 loss, a 1-loss conference champ can usually, in most years, make it in the playoff. But obviously there's always the chaotic situation that the playoff committee fears. And I don't blame him for this. It's going to be really hard at the end of the season if one of these happens, where you have a 12-1 Louisville versus a 12-1 Florida State. Louisville had already defeated Florida State in the ACC championship. Who do you put in? Do you go with recency, who's playing the best then? Because obviously it would be Louisville. Or do you go with, Florida State beat LSU, and they looked better the whole season? I don't know, because Notre Dame is a slightly better win than LSU. So, and it is now, despite what I think about the teams, according to the rankings. So you might have a lot of these crazy situations that could happen. This is why I love November, because you start being like, oh, what did this happen? What did this happen? Whoa, what would the playoff committee do then? Usually it sorts stuff out. Last year we had this. It was going crazy. I was making all of these different scenarios that could happen. Basically right now there could still be a scenario where there's 8 12-1 teams. There could still be a scenario where there's 8 12-1 teams, and it's like, what the heck do you even do with that? I do not wish that upon the committee because that would cause literally a nationwide war to happen. But alas, if it happens with one conference, Oregon might go in over Washington. If they went out and they beat Washington, the only team they lost to, I don't know why you wouldn't put them in. I would put them in over Washington. The way Washington's playing, the way they've looked, they look better all around. So that's the hard part. So, anyways, before I keep on rattling on, this episode is powered by Game Day Prestige and SeatGeek. Use code ShowtimeCFB for $20 off your purchase. All right. I didn't even start with that. I just went into the podcast. I was really eager to talk about that because I finally had my thoughts together and I was like, okay, I can finally explain this in a way that I like to explain it, about the rankings and what they're looking at. So going into week 11, crazy to say it, week 11's already here. We only have 3 more weeks of football. So coming into week 11, I think the question can be begged, well, Chase, who do you think, who's your playoff right now? Who's your top 4? Because I've made a top 4 and I post it every single week. I post my top 25 rankings. But honestly, when I say, okay, a 4-team playoff, who is my top 4? Who deserves to go to the playoff? Who's in right now? It might look a little different. Because it's hard, because it's like, well, are they deserving or are they playing really good right now? Because a team like Oregon, Washington is more deserving than Oregon, but Oregon is probably better than Washington, in my opinion. So who do you put in? Well, to be honest, I really can't answer that. I really don't know who to put in the top 4 right now. Obviously, it's like, oh, Georgia, Michigan. Well, they don't really deserve it, actually. The teams who deserve it is Ohio State, Oregon, Washington, and Texas/Alabama. Those are the teams that deserve it. They've won the games. But as far as best 4 teams, I still hold the belief that Michigan is the best team in the country right now, despite not playing anybody. And I know they can't control that. Their AD can, but they can't. The players can't. The coaches can't. Kind of. But you know what I mean? That's why it's so hard. Because right now we haven't finished out. There's more games to play. So I'm gonna plead the 5th. Isn't the 5th? Yeah. And remain silent on what my top 4 is for a playoff. I've done it before, and I think, honestly, it just makes me look dumb, even to myself. I'm like, well, how would I choose? There's too many areas to go into. I can give you a top 4, top 25, who I think the best teams are, because it doesn't quite matter as much. When you talk about a playoff right now, it's like, well, Oregon, I think, is like the second best team or first best team in the country right now who's playing. I think Oregon and Michigan are the 2 best teams in the country. But Oregon did lose, Washington won. So how did yeah. What can you do? I can make 2 different top 4s. But yeah, that's why I don't blame the playoff committee. It's hard. Gotta stay consistent, but it's really, really hard. But yeah. Also, one last thing on that. Why is Washington ranked ahead of Florida State? Why is that? Why is Washington ranked behind Florida State, is what I meant to say. Why? Give me one reason why. Oh, wait. In every single aspect. Don't worry. I love Florida State. All my Florida State fans, I got a few of you guys. Don't worry. If you're really that good, it'll sort itself out. But think with me here. Why is Washington behind Florida State? Better resume. Easily Washington. Beat a top 10 team. Beat probably one of the best teams in the country. And they won against number 21 Arizona. Good win. Beat USC. Good win. Okay. Florida State. The resume is LSU. Dominant second half against LSU. And Duke, Clemson. I would say the Duke is equal to the USC win, maybe. USC might be a little better than Duke, but they're both not ranked. Both have 3 losses. Okay. So Florida State's resume is obviously less than Washington's. It's not even close. Washington has way better resume than Florida State. Way better. Not even close. And Florida State's resume won't get better to the ACC championship. They pretty much have to run the table. Florida State does. You got to run the table. If you lose any game, you're out. There's no chance. I love Florida State. I love Jordan Travis. I love Keon Coleman. I really hope Florida State goes to the playoff. I honestly love Florida State going to the playoff. No problem with it. But why are they ranked ahead of them? Okay, who's been more dominant? Yeah, Washington struggled in some games. So is Florida State. okay, let's leave the Boston College win behind us. But like Washington has been far more dominant on the offensive side. They did have a struggle against Arizona State, but Florida State was what were they, tied with Pitt at halftime? What? Okay. Florida State, they were down against Duke a bunch. They really struggled against Duke too. But Washington just they beat Arizona and Oregon. Okay. Well, point differential, who has a bit? Well, Washington's offense is like 10 times better. They score way more points. Their point differential is way higher than Florida State's. Okay. So when it comes down to it, I just don't see why Florida State's ranked ahead of Washington. I just don't see why. I don't. There's nothing that would tell me other than like, oh well, they've been ranked ahead of them the whole year, which shouldn't be a thing, but it happens where they've just kind of been at a higher level than Washington the whole year, and so they kind of just keep them there. Path of least resistance from the playoff committee. That's all I'm saying. So, I think Florida State people would be outraged if they got ranked behind Washington. No offense, I would be too if I was a Florida State fan because I'm a fan. Yeah. All right. I'm done talking about this. I'm actually telling the truth this time. I keep on talking the playoff. I know you guys like it. It's fun. I love it too. That's why I like talking about it. This is why I have a podcast, because in November, it is so fun to talk about the playoff and why I don't like or I like the rankings. It's fun. I love it. Anyways. Let's quickly talk about Mike Gundy and Oklahoma State. Just a quick segment. Mike Gundy is the coach of the year as of right now. Things could change. Maybe he loses a bunch of games and whatever. But right now, Mike Gundy should be the coach of the year. No question. I would think Saban, honestly, but Mike Gundy should be the coach of the year. No question. Do you realize how far down the floor was for Oklahoma State? That is a ridiculously low floor they fell down to. South Alabama's a great team for a group of 5 team, but still, you can't lose 33-7 at home to South Alabama when you are Oklahoma State like that. That does not happen. Any Power 5 team, unless you're Northwestern, that does not happen. Okay? There are other teams too, but that cannot happen at a football school athletic program that cares about their football. Doesn't happen. So that is usually a career-ending loss for a lot of coaches. Obviously, Mike Gundy's been there a long time. His job wasn't really in question, but that's one of those you look back and say he was on the decline, right? Like, oh, that is one of the worst losses in his career. Worst loss, probably one of the worst losses in his career, at home to South Alabama. Then they lost to Iowa State, which turns out to be not quite as bad of a loss. Iowa State is actually decent, but still. They were 2-2, pretty much in the depths of college football. They barely beat Arizona State, who wasn't looking too good at that point, and it was like, okay, well, this team is garbage. This team is in like the bottom of the Big 12. Not even close. Well, Mike Gundy, a team doesn't just magically get better, and he knows that. It's all about humility, adjustments. You got to be diligent. Like, this takes freaking persistence to be able to build a team from scraps, to rise from the dead and be 7-2 after beating Kansas State, West Virginia, and then Oklahoma. They just beat some of the, I say, of the 5 teams besides Oklahoma State, they beat the 5 best teams in the Big 12 besides themselves and Texas. Besides themselves and Texas, they beat 3 ranked teams. 3 ranked teams. All in that span. And West Virginia being a very good non-ranked team. They're 7-2 and ranked number 15 in the college football playoff poll in week 11. What would I have told you? They were 2-2 in week 4, and I was like, they're for dead. They're terrible. The Big 12 is terrible. Well, look at them now. That is not a player thing. The players obviously start playing up as they get momentum, but that is that is all coaching. No one just does that. That does not happen, especially when it's a mental loss like that. You didn't lose to, you didn't lose to like Washington at home 33-7. You didn't even lose to like Rutgers at home. You lost to South Alabama at home. And look at him now. That is Mike Gundy, his coaching staff, and that is the most resilient thing I've ever seen in my life. Mike Gundy is in the top tier of coaches. No question. That is wild what he has done at Oklahoma State. No question. And he just won the last Bedlam that will go down probably in one of the biggest wins in Oklahoma State football history. Would you have believed me if I told you that week 4? No. So, Mike Gundy is him, basically is what I'm saying. Mike Gundy is him right now. And I'm so glad he has stayed at Oklahoma State and not taking the job at Tennessee, not gone over, to an SEC school or to a Big Ten school and taking those big jobs, which I'm sure he's been offered. That's why I have a lot of respect for Kyle Whittingham, even though I don't like him at times. He stayed at Utah. He stayed home at Utah. He's probably had some big boy offers, and he hasn't taken them. He said, no, I'm staying with Utah. I love it when these coaches stay at these, you could even say like mid-major, kind of like they're not blue bloods, but like they're a good program. They could easily take jobs that would pay double the amount at Florida or Tennessee like Mike Gundy had. They've flirted with it a few times, but they've stayed home. Love it. I love it. Okay. And by the way, just to add on to that, Oklahoma State is now first place and controlling their own destiny to go to the Big 12 championship. On top of all that, by the way, they're 5-1 in the Big 12. Texas is 5-1 in the Big 12, and no one else. Just those two. As of right now, if it started today, Big 12 championship would include Oklahoma State and not Oklahoma. That's crazy. I love both schools. I lived in Oklahoma for a part of my life. I love both schools. I have Oklahoma shirts. I have Oklahoma State shirts just for fun. I like wearing them. Not during the football season because I go to BYU and true. But, I like both those schools. But Oklahoma State's fun to cheer for. Go Cowboys. All right. Let's get into some predictions for next week. Let's get into it. Obviously, game of the week. Oh, finally, Michigan plays a quality team. This will be the first ranked game for Michigan and only the second for Penn State. Oh my gosh. Penn State, they beat a West Virginia team early in the year, lost to Ohio State. Other than that, Michigan hasn't really played anybody with a pulse. You beat Maryland last week in a dominant win. Really showed, it did show a lot more than just beating Maryland. It was kind of a comeback win because they looked a little sloppy since the Ohio State win or loss. So Penn State kind of did prove a point there. They threw the ball deep finally. But 10 a.m. Mountain Time on Fox. Number 3 Michigan versus number 10 Penn State. Michigan only favored by 4.5. I wish this game was a night game. Oh, imagine Michigan trying to beat Penn State in a whiteout at night. Oh, have we not seen that before? That was a legendary moment in college football. Penn State took down Michigan a few years ago. It was like 2018. That was awesome. Well, here's the thing. Michigan has not proved themselves. Penn State really kind of hasn't proved themselves either. This one's a hard one to pick, honestly, just because Michigan has not played anybody. So my gut wants to say I have Michigan at number 1, so I should choose Michigan. But this game's at Penn State late in the season, and Penn State goes crazy, and that crowd has a legitimate effect in the game. So I don't know. Penn State got a great defense, and they've got hopefully a star in Drew Aller someday. If he starts throwing the ball downfield, which I think he can. The only way Penn State wins this game is if they make big plays. You can't win the game being like, all right, we're going to run the ball and do our thing. No, you're playing the best team in the country, according to me. So you can't just we're going to run the ball and trying to get some dump passes from Drew Aller to the running back or halfback. We're going to try and do that. Nope, you're not going to beat Michigan getting 2 yards of carry. You're not going to do that. You got to do something crazy. You got to risk it a little bit. And I know it's scary, but you got to throw it downfield. You got to do it. So, can Penn State win this game? Oh, I think it's a winnable game in the sense of they have a shot. And the shot's going to come down to the shot they take downfield. If they can't hit those big shots, they can't get explosive plays. Maybe it's a run. If they can't get explosive plays, if they can't say, hey, we can pass the ball, then Michigan's going to be like, oh, okay, we're just going to start, playing run defense, which is probably the best in the country. So we're just going to play our best run defense against your run offense, which is decent, and we'll see who wins the game. Michigan would love it if Penn State said, we're going to run it. Because basically, Penn State hasn't done anything else, really. They're good at throwing short crossing routes, but they can't go deep. I pray, and I would love Penn State to win. I would love a Penn State fan storming the fields classic in November. I would love it. College football. But do I think it will happen? Sadly, I do not. Now, I have on some accounts I have picked. I'm like, oh, Penn State. I don't know, just for fun. But when I'm coming down to it, when I'm talking to you guys as my podcast, ShowtimeCFB mode, I say Michigan is better enough than them to beat them at home in November. I think Michigan is that good. I think J.J. McCarthy does not throw a pick, and I think Michigan comes out of there. If they can silence them early, silence the crowd, and I think they'll handle business in Penn State. But who knows? We haven't seen Michigan play anybody. So who knows? I'm not putting money on this one. I don't usually put money on really anything because I really can't in Utah. But mentally, I'm not putting money on this one. I'm not saying Michigan all the way or Penn State all the way. I'm saying, well, if I'm going to default, I'm going to default towards the team I think is the rest of the country so far. Most dominant team in the country. Down-to-earth team in the terms of field, little penalties, running the ball well, passing the ball efficiently. Michigan is the one. Michigan has enough of a favorite in terms of talent and scheme that I think Michigan can do their thing. Michigan is that good. They don't need to do anything out of the ordinary to go beat Penn State on the road this year. Penn State has to do something crazy to beat Michigan. Can they do it? We'll find out. We will find out at 10 a.m. on Fox. Big noon kickoff. Is College Game Day going there? No, College Game Day is going to Ole Miss. Right? Where's that game? Doesn't Ole Miss play out? Yeah, they do. They play Georgia. Let's go. All right. For a second, I was thinking that was maybe next week. Oh, my gosh. We have 2 top 10 matchups this week, guys. We have 2. I just realized we have 2 top 10 matchups this week. Oh, my gosh. I'm so happy. And they're at different times. Oh, they're not at the same time. Let's go. Oh, man. I'm happy. All right. Jackson Dart and Ole Miss head into Athens, Georgia to play the number 2 ranked Georgia Bulldogs. Can they do it? Ole Miss has an explosive offense, and Georgia, out of nowhere, is starting to develop an explosive offense. An offense that can get it done. Now, they have not played the best defenses so far. Really, there hasn't been much of a test against any defenses that are even good. So, Ole Miss isn't going to do that either because Ole Miss's defense is pretty mid. Okay, well, can their offense outscore Ole Miss? I don't know. Favored by 10.5, Georgia is. Honestly, it's the same thing as Penn State, where I was kind of picking. I've picked Ole Miss, I think, on every single account that I have pick'ems on. But when it comes down to it, I'm on the podcast, on the line. I mean, I do not see Ole Miss winning this game. I just heart and mind and spirit, I just do not see Ole Miss winning this game. Ole Miss typically, just in the past recent years, they win big games, but they don't win the big game of their season. They don't typically beat teams that are ranked ahead of them. Not usually. Obviously, LSU, I think, was ranked 2 spots ahead of them, and they beat them. Great win, obviously, but Ole Miss typically does not beat teams ranked ahead of them substantially, if you guys know what I mean. That's hard in the SEC. I understand that. I'm not saying it's Brian Kelly. I'm not saying you have a curse. You've beaten a lot of ranked teams. You've won a lot of big games, especially this year. But yeah, again, I don't see Ole Miss beating Georgia at home because when Georgia respects their opponent, they tend to play extremely well. And I am finally putting up the white flag and surrendering as I am believing in Georgia for the first time this season after last week. I'm finally saying, all right, frick it. Georgia's good. Georgia's still really good. They're without Brock Bowers, and they are still really good. Ole Miss, are they better than Missouri? I think by a little bit, yeah. Missouri has a little bit better defense. But I'd say Ole Miss overall is a little better, a little more talented than Missouri. They've won some bigger games. So, I think it'll be more of a test. Do I think UGA can cover the 10.5-point line? Let me say no. I'm going to say no, just to keep it interesting here. I think they win by a touchdown. I think Georgia wins by a touchdown. They close it out. Just remember, I would love to see Ole Miss win. I would love it. I would love to see Ole Miss win this game. But I just do not see that happening. And I'm being conservative today. I mean, there are some games that I just can't see it. I would love to manifest it. Maybe I can manifest it by calling Ole Miss to win, but I do not see Jackson Dart. Love him to death. Good quarterback. I do not see him pulling out of there with a win. So, maybe they give him a run for their money in the first half, maybe through 3 quarters. Especially because it's a 5 o'clock kickoff, 7 o'clock where Georgia's playing. I mean, that's kicking off after dark. Night game is much harder than a day game to win. So, yeah. Another game I wanted to talk about, Utah goes to Washington. Washington gets to build on their already very good resume against Utah. Washington is favored by 9.5, which kind of startled me at first. I was thinking this was going to be like a touchdown. But Utah finally got their offense rolling a little bit against Arizona State. Let's see what you want from Arizona State. But Washington didn't score a touchdown against these guys. Against Arizona State. So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's a fluke, but something to note. Can Michael Penix perform? He's been a little sluggish, little bit. He's still doing his thing. Got his swagger back last week against USC. However, that defense is atrocious. Utah's defense is one of the best in the country. Utah's rush defense is number 10 in the country. Scary. Rush is in rushing the quarterback. Like their pass rush is number 10 in the country. Do I think Utah has a chance? No, I do not. My Utah fans, I'm sorry. But again, I think Utah is just too imbalanced to win these big games. You beat USC, but we've seen how good USC is now. And Utah, you're starting to get your stuff a little bit back together. I respect it. Honestly, I respect Utah a lot more than I thought I would coming this far into the season. Utah is imbalanced not because of their own fault, but because of injuries, which my heart goes out to you. But there's no way that Utah goes into Washington and wins. Call me out. If you do it, you do it. Then good on pig farmer Bryson Barnes from down the road, a few hours south of where I live. Gotta respect the small town. I love him for that. And so, if Utah wins, they win, I guess. Obviously. But I think Washington gets some swagger back. They've been a little bit down, and they've been a little bit sluggish. The USC win kind of hyped them up a little bit, like I just said. But this Utah win would be huge. It really cement Washington because people kind of doubting them a little bit. It'd cement Washington as a top 4 team right now. That's what I'd say, because it would objectively put their resume and say, well, we're better than Oregon because we beat them and we beat Utah. It gives you another reason for Washington fans to say, well, we have a better resume than Oregon and we're better than them. Another reason. So, obviously, head-to-head does that very well. If Washington crushes Utah, then honestly, let's say Washington wins 35-6 against Utah. I know it's at Washington, makes it a little bit easier. Let's say they win 55-6. They scored 2 more times on Utah's really good defense. Would I still think Oregon is better than Washington? Maybe not. It depends. All depends on how it looks, the eye test, how they do it. But that would give Washington legitimate, hey, we are championship contenders. This is a big game for them. This, I think, turns the corner because a lot of people, including me, are saying, well, they're kind of a tier down from those big dogs. The top 3. They might be a tier down. Even though the resume is really good, they just haven't looked crazy dominant. Penix has looked inconsistent, and inconsistency leads to playoff failures. You know, the only thing for Washington, the main thing for them and for me is can you elevate the defense to a playoff level? That's the thing. Can you elevate? Because Washington's offense, best in the country. Best in the country. Got to be a little more consistent, but still best in the country right now. No question. Oregon and USC are right there. But, oh yeah. Best in the country. But only balanced teams win championships. You can't win a team with just offense. And right now, Washington's defense looks pretty dang mediocre. Mid. And obviously, the USC game is different because USC's offense is also one of the best in the country. So it's like, okay, well, whatever. And their defense did okay against Oregon, who was also one of the best in the country. It's like, oh, okay, whatever. So it's hard to judge Washington's defense because they've either played the best offenses in the country or like the worst. So it's like, okay, well, they've done it. See, it's just kind of hard. I think this Utah team, not the best offense, but it's going to prove something. If Utah scores more than 20 points on offense on this Washington defense, then we might have a problem. So, that's all I'm saying. I'm picking Washington to win this game. I am picking Washington to cover the spread. I think Washington handles Utah. Not crazy confident like I was against USC. USC, I blew that out of the water. I said Washington's easily better than this team. They should win. Not the craziest pick, but I was so surprised by that line. And they beat that. I think Washington wins by 10 or more, covering the spread, and that they get it done. So, yeah, Washington has a hard end of the season. They play Oregon State, Washington State, and Utah at the end of the season. Not an easy road. They play Oregon State next week in Corvallis. That's going to be a big test. Yeah. Washington has the work cut out for them. It's going to be really hard. Let's say Washington. Let's go into it for a second. Let's go in for 1 second. Because of Washington's schedule and who they play, it is going to be so hard to keep them out of the playoff if they lose to Oregon in the Pac-12 championship. Let's say Oregon runs the table. Oregon is undefeated with their only loss being to Washington. They beat Washington in the Pac-12 championship. Okay. Oregon should be in, right? They're 12-1. Wait. But Washington, on their way to this Pac-12 championship that they earned to be in, they went undefeated before the Pac-12 championship. They beat Utah, Oregon State, Washington State, Oregon, and Arizona, and USC. How the heck are you leaving that team out of the playoff? Oh, yeah, and also there's an undefeated Florida State, and Georgia, and Michigan. Oh, wait. Oh, also there's a Texas team that came back from the dead and is 12-1. That beat whoever in the Big 12 championship. I don't know how you leave both Oregon and Washington. Yeah, I don't know how you don't have both of them in if they do that. Crazy. That would be a crazy situation. You have never had two teams, if that happens, you have never had two teams with that good of resumes from the same conference in question. Never even close. Michigan and Ohio State last year only really happened because the way things played out, there was no one really to take that fourth spot, and so Ohio State was the best team that was a non-conference champ, and so they got put in, which was a pretty easy decision, I feel like, for last year's playoff. It made it really easy for the playoff committee to decide for. This year could be crazy. Or it could just level itself out. Oregon loses a game. Washington goes undefeated, wins the Pac-12. Yada, yada, yada. Yeah. We'll see. All right, y'all. Any other big games this week? Not too many. Oh, yeah. Tennessee, Missouri. Tennessee, Missouri. Good game. Who do I got in this game? It is at Missouri. Give me Mizzou. Mizzou. Tennessee is favored by 1 point in Missouri territory. Tennessee is definitely more talented. It's Tennessee. They recruit like Alabama. But do I think Missouri is a better team altogether? Yes, I think Brady Cook rebounds and beats Tennessee. Do I have any reasoning? No. I just want Tennessee to win this game, and they're so equal that I'm going to choose Missouri. Or I want Missouri to win this game, and they're so equal that I want Missouri to win, and I'm going to choose them. Yeah. Yeah. That's who I got for this one. And obviously, USC Oregon's worth noting, but you already know who I'm picking for that one. I think these teams are such big opposites. However, the mental aspect of college football, Is USC going to get trounced by Oregon? I don't think so. I think USC is pretty dang pissed. I mean, they've lost 3 straight. Well, you can almost say they lost 4 straight because that Cal win was so bad. It was worse than a win, or it was worse than a loss, bro. Honestly, like it was so bad. It wasn't worse than a loss, but it was really bad. Yeah, USC, Oregon. Obviously, I got Oregon winning this game. They are favored by 15 points. Do I think Oregon can defend USC well? Yes. Oregon has one of the best pass rushes in the country and one of the best pass defenses in the country. One of the best rush defenses in the country. Oregon's defense is so amazing that I think that USC can't do what they like to do against them. And if you can stop USC's offense, you stop the whole team. You stop the train. So, yeah. Oregon's good. I like Oregon a lot. I really hope the playoff rankings this week showcase some consistency, showcase what I would like, but I don't know if that's going to happen. Let me know what y'all think about my takes on the college football playoff committee, how you feel about that. Obviously, there's not really any wrong answers, as long as you have a defined criteria. That's what I say. I think y'all would agree with me. If you have a defined criteria, then there's no problem with what you think. If it's defined, if you just think that resume is objectively the best, or head-to-head is objectively the best, then stick to it, and your rankings will be respected. If you're very consistent, if you say, this is what I think, and this is why I think it, this is why it is, this is why I put them there. That's how it's always going to be. Obviously, you don't have to be resume for everything, but you can be very opinionated on one thing. As long as you're consistent, you're good. That's how I feel. And consistent being, you can change. Here's what I mean. You can change based on like weeks and how teams look, but you can't change based on how you evaluate each team in 1 week. That's the main thing. You can't change. You can't use different criteria against different teams to justify their ranking. You got to use. If you're going to use one criteria for another team, you should use it for the next team behind them. So there you go. There you go. Doesn't mean you can have several aspects of that criteria, but the criteria itself should be the same. All right, guys. That's all I got. I am so excited for this week of college football. 2 top 10 matchups. We don't have that hardly ever. 2 top 10 matchups. Let's go. All right, guys. Have a good one. I'm excited to be back. It's been good to be podcasting again. I have been struggling this week to get it done, and it's so good to be back. All right. Happy November, NCFB. Signing off from Showtime College Football.